This is Myth, life and performance coach for ambitious individuals looking to spark and initiate their next evolution using my aligned results framework. And this is the Actually You Can podcast. If you're here, you're probably an ambitious individual looking to achieve big things and live a thriving, fulfilling life. If so, you've come to the right place. I believe that in order to reach your goals, you must first do the inner work to gain a better understanding of yourself, your habits, and how you view yourself and the world. You then need to develop sustainable behavior patterns that will best support you in reaching your goals. And this is exactly what this podcast is here to support you with. Be sure to hit subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to so you can easily find this podcast again and tune in for future episodes. We release episodes every week. Today we're journeying into the world of men's mental health with Matt Musgrave. Matt is a counsellor and the founder of Strong Space Counselling, an online private practice that focuses on supporting the mental health and growth of men and fathers. Together we discuss how you can start to navigate the challenges of masculinity and mental health. Because actually, you can. Thanks so much for jumping on today, Matt. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, Miff, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's so exciting to catch up again. It's been so long.
I know, I was just thinking about that. We were having a chat before, and when we last connected, we were in the fitness space and we were just bonding over a shared passion now for cleaning products. I think life has changed since we first met, and I'm here for it.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I'm fully embracing my newfound fun and passion of cleaning and cleaning products.
And your life has definitely evolved since we last connected. And so I'd love to kick off this chat by sharing a bit about what does life look like for Matt Musgrave at the moment? What do you do? Who are you?
Yeah. So, I am a husband and father of two boys, and they're sort of almost 4, almost 2. So, a couple of months until their birthdays, and I am now running my full-time business and an online private practice, Strong Space Counselling, working 100% with men and fathers and supporting their mental health and growth and change. So that's pretty much, they're the two main areas of my life these days that take up almost all of my time and attention, as you can imagine. So yeah, counseling, dad life, husbanding, and spending my time cleaning the house, more or less.
Good balance of different activities there. And you mentioned the work that you do with Strong Space. Can you tell us a bit more about what that business is?
Yeah, so I founded Strong Space back in March of last year, so it's been about 18 months now. And it kind of came off the back of the birth of my second son. So I had 3 months paternity leave from a organization that I was working with in the community before that, and it basically throughout that 3 months that I was off, um, struggling with the second boy who was having a lot of breathing health issues, a lot of challenges eating, breastfeeding, a lot of medical appointments and stuff. Um, it got to a point where I really had to question and ask myself whether or not going back to work was going to be a viable option for my wife and I. And whilst it was always my plan to run the business and it was always my plan to dive in headfirst, it probably wasn't the plan to do it so quickly and so spontaneously and with no kind of transition. I finished that paternity leave and I said, I'm done. I can't come back to work. I can't maintain what I'm doing here at home with the intensity of the level of work that I was doing. Prior to that, I was running groups. I was doing nighttime, late night work, finishing 9, 10 o'clock at night, running behavior change programs. I was doing a lot of case management. It was a lot of child protection. Um, and so I was I was really dreading, not the work. I love the work, but the balance of what was going on. So I jumped right on in, a little, maybe let's say unprepared, one would say, but within sort of 3 months, that's what I said to my wife. I said, look, let's give me 3 months. Okay. And if it's not viable, if things don't pick up, if we don't see some glimmer that this is going to be sort of possible, then, I'll go out and I'll find another counseling job somewhere else. I just graduated with my my postgrad diploma just in the December before, so a few months beforehand. So I was like, now I can go and be a counselor. So, but in that first 3 months, I sort of had nearly half my client caseload. I had all my referrals. I was networking, and things kind of just picked up really, really quickly. So I knew I was onto something, and I kind of by the end of last year, by December last year, there was no turning back. I'm now full time in the business. I see clients. I see upwards about 20 clients a week, 5 clients a day, 4 days a week, and I have Fridays like today off to kind of self care and debrief and do admin and business and just really trying to make it work. But I absolutely love it, and I'm so glad that I took the risk and that my wife was able to support me and dive into what I'm doing now because it's the best work in the world.
It's so beautiful to hear that you're being rewarded for going all in on yourself. You had the support of your wife, and now you've created something truly special, and it's enabled you to have the flexibility and a bit more of a balanced lifestyle and still do such fulfilling
Mm,
work, which sounds like you were doing before. And I'd be interested
mm,
if you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience a bit more about your
mm.
background. And it sounds like your business really took off, and that's because you have a great deal of experience in several areas. And so I would love for you to share a
I
bit more
do.
about that.
Yeah, so a bit. I mean, counseling's not too far off what I was doing for 6 years beforehand, I suppose. But I'm originally from a small country town. I grew up in the bush. I went to all boys boarding school for 6 years, so I was very heavily kind of indoctrinated into um, a colloquial Aussie bogan kind of culture growing up, plus the boarding school, hyper masculinity, all those sorts of things. Consequently, joined the army soon after that, and that's how I found myself here in Canberra. And spent a couple of years at the Australian Defence Force Academy, still trying to figure out what I kind of wanted in that space. I was like, yeah, the army is what men do, so I'm going to join the army. Um, Turned out I met my wife, my now wife there. We were both in the same division, and that's how we got to know each other. And while she left a little bit before me, eventually she came back to Canberra to study here, and so we really hit it off, and we made it work long distance. And so I've been in Canberra sort of ever since 2012. And whilst I was kind of figuring out when I was leaving the army what exactly I wanted to do, I decided to put my hat in the ring for a criminology and psychology degree. And I thought, yeah, that'll be great. I'll come back into the army, and I'll be military police, and I'll work my way in. And I really want to be a psychologist that assess and review special forces. That was my goal when I first left. I was like, I'll leave the army now, and I'll go and study this thing that's going to put me in a position to come back to the army where I'm going to be. And then I got out of the army, and I was like, I'm never going back into the army again. Um, because I didn't really know what I was missing out on at the time. I didn't really realize how unhappy I was and how toxic that culture was for me. I had a pretty severe drinking problem. I was spending unfathomable amounts of money on alcohol at the time, and that was really just in order to maintain and mitigate my social anxiety in those spaces, and make sure that I could, just keep going. So I was drinking in the divisions, and down in the mess hall 2, 3, 4, 5 nights a week on some occasions, and the drinks in the mess are like $2, $2 a drink, so you can smash four bourbon and cokes for $8 or five of them for $10 before you even, and they'll just line them up on the bar, and you just sort of scull them. So it's like a very indoctrinated alcohol culture that I was sort of in. And when I got out, I realized just how much more control I had over myself, how much more I really was able to sort of come home a little bit to myself and realize that I wasn't being so majorly influenced by these people around me. Wonderful, wonderful people. There was nothing majorly terrible about it. But once you put 300, 270 guys and 30 women in a hyper masculine military, binge drinking, drug using kind of culture, like there's always going to be some sort of struggles, and some people rise to the top, and there's some social hierarchical stuff. And I found myself for the first time in my life at the top of the social hierarchy. Um, I know I was being picked for like leadership positions in the rugby club, and, captaining the second grade team. And And all of a sudden, and that's where I just felt all this pressure just to be really, to be included and to do what I needed to do in order to be popular and good. So anyway, I ended up with a pretty severe drinking problem as a result of that binge drinking problem. And when I left, I found out I hated psychology. And so I just scrapped that and just did the criminology degree because I loved the criminology side of things, and found myself working as a probation parole officer in community corrections for 3 years straight out of uni. And then, like I said before, 3 years doing men's behavior change for domestic violence perpetrators, men who use violence in relationships. So I was really in the weeds. I was really at the pointy end of sort of men's violence and men's anger, and um, we were struggling a lot with like risk assessment, and I was the only man out of 50 people in the organization. So, I had this huge amount of pressure, that I felt like, here we are working with men. It's an organization full of women. It was wonderful. They were incredible, but I had a huge learning curve about the female experience and about feminism and about gender equality and about men's behavior and how that all interplays. So I jumped into that and I was like, I want to be a counselor. I want to talk to people. I want to, like, this is great, but I want to be working one on one with guys. I want to be working with mental health. I don't want to be working with violence, particularly. I don't want to be doing risk management stuff or case management stuff, which is what I was doing in those roles. But I love working individually with guys. So I spent the next 3 years studying my graduate diploma in counseling psychology, and here I am, nearly 2 years later, in a couple of months, absolutely thriving and loving it, and working solely with men online across Australia. So it's really exciting. And as I sort of look back on that, there's a lot there, isn't there? I've been through a lot in 10 years. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I'm so excited for you just hearing it all come together. It definitely sounds like it's something that's super
Mm,
aligned for the person that I know you to be, and I'm really interested to
mm.
hear what prompted you to move specifically into working one-on-one people one-on-one with people. What do you believe you can achieve in that capacity that you weren't doing beforehand?
Well, so I've when I was working in those 6 years in for the government and for the community sector, I was always doing one-on-one work. I was always doing case management, but it was all case management is very administrational. It's very you know we're ticking boxes
Mm,
rather than talking and getting into more of the deep work, and it's less connection and it's more administration. And that was great. That was a one. I'm super glad that I fell into that in a way, because it really kind of grounded me in my sense that I really want to be working with people. Then I moved over to the community sector, still doing case management, but adding in group facilitation into that space as well. So now all of a sudden I was doing the one-on-one case management stuff. What have you been up to? What are the changes? Any updates for me, any incidents, any contacts with police, and really it's just information gathering in a lot of ways. And sort of, it's kind of referred to as accidental counseling. We're doing the validating, we're doing the support work. We might be the only person that they're talking to, but we're not trained counselors in that
mm,
space. So when I actually got into the group facilitation side of things, that's when I started to really see the transformative nature of behavior change work. Right? It was a step in the right direction of what makes guys tick. What are they thinking about? What are their rationalizations? Because obviously, in those as I was working with violent perpetrators, right? I was working with
mm,
men who used physical, emotional, psychological, violence, sexual violence, coercive control towards partners, ex partners, and even their children. So it was really intense kind of stuff. But when you start there, when that's the toe that you're dipping into the water, and it happens to be sex offenders and violent criminals, it kind of makes everything else that other people bring really easy to kind of handle and easy to deal with, because there's a lot less risk attached to it. So, but I was just absolutely struck by the way in which these guys were rationalizing, believing that what they were doing was okay, that what they were doing was not only okay, but expected not only of them, but that their partners or their children would have to kind of just put up with and deal with without consequences. And then there's consequences, and all of a sudden these guys are half of them forced into that position, and the other half kind of putting their hands up before it gets too bad or before they end up in the police or criminal justice sort of laneway, I suppose, before they get that contact. So it was, I was really lucky to spend 3 years helping guys explore, unpack, transform, understand, identify, deepen their own awareness, right, around behaviors, around belief systems, around intentions, um, and it really kicked it off. And so counseling was the next, like one-on-one counseling was always going to private practice was always going to be the logical next step for me. I do want to be running groups again because there's a format like no other, when guys can come together and be vulnerable together and see that it's all normal and okay and we all share struggles. And even if that person has a different story to me, then I can still take a lot out of how they're thinking about it. And there's still a real reflective, connective practice in it. So I will do that one day. I just simply don't have the time at the moment. When the kids are a bit older and I get some night times back, then yes, I will absolutely um, be moving. I'll expand strong placings to include some groups for dads and some groups for men as well.
So stay tuned for that next evolution.
Yes, absolutely.
And so you mentioned before, I'd love to take you back to the army days for a second, that it was
Mm,
a hyper masculine environment and joining the army was just what men do. I'm doing little air quotes for those
yeah,
who listening can't see.
yeah.
But knowing what you know now, what would you have said to the Matt that was saying that to himself at the time? This is what men do.
Ironically enough, a part of me is as soon as you reflected those words back to me, um, I'm noticing a part say, literally no one else in your life has ever joined the army. No other man in my entire life. No one from my school, no one from my year, no one from my hometown, none of my family. Um, so it's actually like the more I reflect on it, it's actually quite an irrational and a logical thought process that I was sort of having back then. And I think I got a lot of support when I put the idea out there from a lot of my mates that were like, that's awesome. Go to ADFA, get a degree, join the army, Matt the army guy. So I got a lot of validation from the
Mm,
people around me around how cool that would be. Um, but I do think I probably just assumed it from someone else. Like I probably just read about it somewhere or I saw it in a magazine and said, oh, yeah, that'd be cool. Like that's really similar to boarding school. And then just rationalize that with it's actually like this is what guys do, this is really masculine, this is what I'm good at. And eventually that part just tried to that like just convinced me into that being a good thing. What would I say to that guy now though? I mean, I think he would have been pretty hard pressed trying to convince me out of it, knowing how fixated I was at the
mm,
time. Um, But at the same time, as I sit here and kind of ponder and reflect, no one was questioning it.
yeah.
No one was even really curious about it. No one, like my mum and my dad, were not fans of the idea,
Mhm.
but they're also the kinds of parents who aren't going to interfere in my decision making either. They're going to say, all right, well, if that's what you want to do and you're sure, then we'll support you. But and mum always used to say, just make sure you get a job, I'm ordering the toilet paper, right? No front lines roles for my son, please. So she'd make her little comments, from time to time, which gave me a pretty good insight that she wasn't keen on the idea. Um, but no one was really even curious. Right. And so I suppose if I was to go back now, I would really be trying to connect with that younger version of myself and saying, talk to me. What is it about the army that really drives you? Like, what would you do if you didn't join the army? How would you feel then?
Mm,
Right. If this offer was taken off the table, if you don't get in, right? And there was never a moment in my entire time. It's incredibly, there's 300 people in each year go to ADFA out of about 10,000 applicants, right? So there's this tiny number. And yet in my mind, there was not a single doubt that I wasn't going to get in, right? Because I was just so fixated on this idea. And eventually I did, they saw something in me and, I got into the officer selection and, um, but not, yeah. So that's what I would do. I'd really be connecting with that younger version of myself saying, what is this doing for you? Right? Is this what you really want? And if it is, how do you know that? Because back then I had no idea what I really want. I was just kind of all over the place doing whatever anyone told me or anything I thought was cool. I was not connected or attuned to myself at all, which I don't think we can expect 18, 19-year-old kids to be, let's be honest.
100%.
But a little support, right? I suppose a lot of it felt like I was doing, making these huge life decisions on my own with um, support, but no questioning, curiosity. Mm.
Yeah. And even hearing you talk about, you might have seen it somewhere or someone's mentioned the army to you. I remember a mentor saying to me once, I said, my goal is to have a white SUV. And then my mentor said to
Mm.
me, which successful person do you know has a white SUV? And I was like,
Yes.
very good point. I'd somehow, and I was able to name the person, but I'd seen them
Yep.
and they had this product, and then I'd associated success with having this car. And so it's interesting how if you kind of look back and just take a moment to really go, hey, what's going on here? What has made you decide this? What clues can pop up? I mean, I got the white SUV. It's not the same spec and the same brand of car as this person had it. It's whatever I could
Yeah.
have afforded. But yeah, it's really interesting where that decision came from. And I think to your point too, it's not to say, I mean, your journey in the army seems like it was really pivotal to where you are
Crushed it.
today and, unleashed some really beautiful gifts within yourself. And so it's not to say that our journeys are all full of mistakes and fuck ups along the way to we finally have this awakening and life's perfect. I mean, we're on
Right.
our journey and it sounds like all the doors just opened up for you on this particular path.
Yeah. And I think something that's like really important that you just highlighted just then was just because we can question a thought doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong or it's bad or, that it's unhelpful in any way. So something that my clients and I do, they kind of go, oh, now I know why I did that. Or, oh, that makes so much more sense to me now. It must be bad or it must or for example, if they start to notice their anxiety, like, oh, I'm feeling really anxious or I'm feeling really guilty about that thing. All of a sudden they say that thing is bad, I'm like, well, not necessarily. Maybe, certainly maybe. And as we reflect and we notice and we gather more information and we gather the rest of the data and we understand our feelings and not just the thought processes and we're connecting that, like you say, to memories and people and meaning and identity, doesn't inherently mean that buying the white SUV is not what you want,
Yeah.
right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a symbol of success
Yep.
to you, right? But knowing that gives us a clearer picture around why we're making the decision, which can be really helpful in having confidence in our decision making, right? So I think one of the really, really important points around, a reflective practice or self-awareness is it can be really clarifying. Oh shit, that was not the best decision. I now don't feel good about that. But it's also a way of sort of saying, oh, I get why I did that. And it makes so much more sense now. And that's good. I feel better about it. Right. Even if it doesn't necessarily move the needle or change anything about your life. Right.
Yeah.
I
And
think you just highlighted that beautifully there, Mish, with that SUV story. It
honestly,
was perfect.
thank you. I'm like, I feel so seen right now. Like, I think I just made a similar
Yeah.
decision. Um,
You can find me on my website at strongplacecounseling.com. Yeah.
No, it's great. And hearing you talk about, just reflecting on your decisions, I think there's also sometimes it's really easy to get caught up in our thoughts and we think too much about our thoughts and give them so much weight that we get stuck in our mind and we're not actually in the mode of taking action. What would you say to someone
Mm.
who's maybe stuck in that reflection or getting a bit analysis paralysis of just all the thoughts that are going through their head, not able to make a decision or not able to take action, I should say?
I feel like you're personally attacking me here as well, by the way, Miss. because that's me in a nutshell, right? And yet there are these parts of me that can also equally dive in headfirst without thinking about anything, like I did
Yeah.
with my business. Seems to be one end or the other of that spectrum.
Oh,
Um,
life is beautiful
I
like that, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? The polarity of it all. It it's a difficult question to answer for me only because I'm training in a really particular therapy modality, which sort of leverages what we call parts work, and it this the way that I would explain it to my client in this particular case would be you when we are stuck, when we're experiencing conflict, when we're experiencing overwhelm internally, we have a part of us that is dialed up into an extreme kind of version of its role. And it might be battling or fighting against or polarized with another part of you. So let's take, for example, I want to start the business, but I don't want to lose money or I don't want to
Mm,
be without a job or whatnot. Both of those are really important parts of that decision. But when they're both dialed up to an
mm,
intense level, we can feel a lot of internal friction, right, happening. So it's not that any particular thought or that the feeling of being stuck
mm,
is bad or problematic, right? But it also may not be helpful in that moment to actually making a decision. So in those cases, there's a couple. I simplify the model and I butcher it in a way just to make it easy. Just it's such a complex model. Um, into sort of three steps of the process that me and my clients work on. And this is by no means definitive, and nor is it linear necessarily. But the first one that we work on is self awareness, all right, and self reflection. So those are interchangeable, and that is developing a reflective practice so that we can at least become aware of the conflicting parts, right? So if I have an anxious part dialed up or an overthinking part dialed up, right, I want to be aware of that in the first instance. I want to be able to capture that and know how it feels and know where I feel it and know what it wants from me and what it's doing for me and what its role is and what it's worried would happen if it didn't get anxious and if it did make that decision. But that kind of doesn't end there. Knowing that doesn't change anything
yeah.
necessarily,
You're like,
right?
"Cool. Okay. So what do I do now?"
Cool. And now I just need to mull in this, and that's what a lot of people struggle with. The second pillar that I like to work with my clients on is, I think, the most important pillar and the most important thing that anybody can learn to do is the pillar of self compassion.
Mm,
We cannot shame ourselves into effective behavior change. I'll say that again. You cannot shame yourself into effective, healthy behavior change. I promise you, it does not matter what type of therapy, counseling, personal development, growth you do in your life. If you do it through the lens of shame, you will struggle because nothing you do will ever be good enough. All right. And nothing will be right. And there will always be fear of losing it. Always. Right. So that begs the question, what do we do instead? Right. And and this is the thing that most people struggle with the most is the self-compassion lens of this, right? How do I actually hold that things I struggle with and the challenges that I face and the things that are hard are perfectly normal?
mm,
Not only are they perfectly normal, but they are a wonderful part of me that are protecting me from something, even if it's not true, even if it's not relevant, even if it's not helpful, they are protecting me from something that they believe is going to negatively impact me. If we can hold that for ourselves, then it doesn't matter how we feel and it doesn't matter what we think, right? We can say, yes, I really get it. So this would be my language. I'm really struggling. I don't want to quit my job and start this business and not and kind of be left out, hung out to dry and have no money, and I won't be able to support my family, and then nobody else will hire me because I haven't have experience as a counselor yet. Maybe well, what would I do? All right, that might stop me. Now, if I say, oh, wow. Yeah, that makes complete sense that you would want to protect me from not being able to support my family and lose my house and not find another job and then be destitute and homeless and have to move back in with the parents and move back to the small country town. And my wife would hate me and we'd be getting a divorce and I'd never see the kids again. Right. I know you don't want me to feel that. That makes a lot of sense. And I appreciate that. I hold so much compassion for what you're trying to do for me in this moment. And, and that's not helpful for me right now. So I want you to know I got all of it. I've written it all down, maybe in a journal, right? Thank you. And I'm just going to move on. That's the first step, right? Holding the compassion, embracing that part, not shaming it for what it's trying to do. All right. And then moving through it. The third pillar we call self leadership. This is significantly harder to do. All right. This is the what now, right? Now what do we do? Right. And in the parts work model and internal family systems model, we would resource other parts and we would leverage self energy, um, which I can explain if you'd like to, in order to start to be a little bit more confident in ourselves and step into a little bit more curiosity and compassion and confidence and courage to do some of the things that our parts are worried about us doing. And therefore, we start building trust with ourselves, trust in our own ability, right? And we can also resource those parts. So, my anxious part, right? I want that part to tell me what all the risks are.
100%, right?
It's a good part,
Yeah.
right? It knows really acutely what could go wrong. That's important for me to know as a business owner, right? That's important for me to mitigate around, maybe not to dwell on. So I still resource that part. I still leverage that anxiety and I just do it in a controlled environment. I say, hey, what are we worried about here? You know it. I know you know it. Let's bring that forward and you share with me the information. I'm going to note it all down. And how do you feel now that I've got it all down that I can come up with a plan or, I can, and you realize I've already got all these things in place, right? I've
Mhm.
got another job in place. If things go to shit, we've got X amount of money in the bank. We can last an extra 3 months, plenty of time for it, whatever it is. Right. And that part goes, oh yeah, no, good, good. Thank you. And it dials back down. Right. So, connection, leadership, compassion, all of these wonderful things that I work with my clients on, and also that I do every day for myself as well. Yeah.
That's such a wonderful approach. I've heard often, and this is something I work with my clients, is understanding the role
Mm,
your beliefs and thoughts play in the actions
yeah.
that you ultimately take, and adding that element of self-compassion in there, I think is so beautiful. I haven't heard of that in any other frameworks before, so thank you so much for sharing that because
Mm,
I mean, I
yeah.
completely agree with what you shared before, is you can't shame yourself into and taking any sort of meaningful change. But yeah, I hadn't heard it explained quite so eloquently before, so thank you for that.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. And you can probably hear I'm deeply passionate about this work and about
Just
this
a little bit.
model and yeah, just a little bit. And especially like for a lot of people, especially a lot of men that I work with, like they don't get this
Mm,
narrative at any point in their life around self-compassion. It's entirely shame-based, it's entirely power oriented and hierarchically led, right? Who's cool, who's not cool, who's bully, who's weak, who's strong, who's successful, who's got the money, who's got the family, who's got the most degrees, who's the funniest one, who's the sportiest one, who's athletic, who does this, who does that, right? And we all constantly as men, and I can't speak to the female experience, but as
mm,
men, there's this huge weight that's sort of that's placed on our standard in relationship with other people, right?
mm,
With other men. And there can be a lot of competition in that, and there can be a lot of shame in that about not feeling good enough and not feeling acceptable enough or needing to sort of fit ourselves into that man box kind of culture around, being funny and being like a larrikin and not being too deep and not being too, emotional and being very logical and intellectual. And like I said, there's no bad parts in that necessarily in isolation, but when they're the only parts that you leverage, it can become quite an isolating, quite an inauthentic experience for a lot of guys, and it becomes really normal, right? Where all of a sudden we have no confidence in ourselves because we've never been able to be authentic in ourselves. We don't know what we like. We don't know what we want. We don't know how we want to be. We don't know what we want to do. Right. And that can make it really hard, for it to make decisions and to feel confident and to not rely on other people or look externally. Um, and so that's easily and by far one of the probably the biggest challenge that my clients face every single day is actually learning who the hell am I? Who do I want to be? Right? We've heard of them, the idea of the men masking, their true feelings and emotions, and it's like what exists under that mask? What do you look like underneath all of that? Right? If you were to shed some of those burdens and understandable but maybe unhelpful beliefs about yourself and about the world, what would you do instead? What would life look like if you didn't have to worry about how you were in a scale of, 1 to 10 popularity or how good you are at your job, how much money you make? What would you focus on then? Right. And most guys don't know how to answer that question.
Listen. And so what would you say to someone, like, what would you say specifically to a man who's trying to fit them, I like how you called it the man box. If they're trying to fit themselves into a man box and it's just like fitting a round peg in a square hole, like this isn't working for me, but if I don't fit
Mm.
into this, then I'm not a man. My wife's going to leave me. My kids are going to hate me. What would you say to someone who's in that spiral?
That the two things. The first one is it's completely true. I know it. If you change now from who you are right now, who you've been trying to be all of your life, now all of a sudden you're a different person, and everybody around you is going to have to change and relate differently to you, and that's going to cause a lot of friction. And if all of a sudden you've been like this really kind, gentle, people pleasing kind of man, and you step into a bit of courage and express your anger or ask for your needs, then that might cause friction to that
Yeah.
person, opposite you, and that's scary for us. Change is scary for us, so it does reinforce the pattern that being outside this box pushes people away, right? It's just also not necessarily true at the same time, right? Just because someone doesn't know how to respond to you as you change and do things differently, and they might struggle, or the relationship might need some recalibrating, doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong or it's bad, right? Um, it's hard for sure because those relationships are the things we rely upon. But there are people like coaches, like counselors, like therapists, like psychologists who can support you to be that grounded base in all of the re-navigation you're going to need to do in your relationships. So yes, let's be very clear here. It is going to change things, but that's kind of the point. We need to have that, especially as men, we need to have that resilience to be able to say, I need to change and that's going to ruffle feathers. And I need to be okay with that. Right. Because the way I'm doing things now it's not working.
Yeah, and I think that's something I share with my clients too, who go, "Oh, it's gonna be hard to change." And I was like, "Well, what's gonna be harder, living the next 5 or the rest of your life like this, or going through this period of change?" And they're like, yeah, good point."
It's I mean, you kind of choose your hard, but
Yeah.
without knowing you're choosing it, right?
Mm,
That's what the reflective
point.
practice does, right? When you've got somebody telling you, here's an alternative, or, there's some hope here for these, for stronger relationships, or, a partner who loves you, a partner who's safe for you, a partner who can hold your feelings and your fears and your burdens and your trauma, safely, even if they can't do that right now, that it is possible, right? Um, that reflective process, that self awareness causes us to just be aware of the choices that we're making now and the choices of how we're keeping ourselves maybe stuck or in my language, protected, right? And that, like I said, with the self awareness piece, like that can cause grief, that can cause shame, that can cause guilt, that can cause confusion for a lot of men in terms of what now? Now I'm just sitting with the fact that I can't change. Now I'm just sitting with the fact I know what to do, I know how to do it, but I can't do it, right?
Yeah,
And if they don't have that support, it can be really muddy. It can be really, really tricky. You know?
yeah. And Out of curiosity, I know there's particular environments for women. So if you're following, influencers on Instagram who are all fitness and on who promote particular
Mm.
body images and stuff, that can be quite damaging environments, for lack of a better term, for women. Are there any environments that men are putting themselves in that are probably having similar impacts?
Every environment in modern society, I would say, and the large majority of are not overly helpful for guys because they're not structured to permit men to be authentic and to be vulnerable and to express struggle and concern, and people don't know how to manage it, right? Um, we've seen a huge increase in uptake in younger generations moving towards some pretty, I would say, nasty misogynistic beliefs and ideas about the world. And we also know, on the other hand, that things are also getting better for a lot of these marginalized communities. Not great, still not awesome, and still a lot of trauma being caused day to day, but better than, generations before, and more acceptance and love and tolerance. But for men, in particular, as the kind of default of, what we might consider a patriarchal or capitalistic kind of society, there's still not a huge rhetoric. There's still not a huge push. There's still not a huge movement of healthy, vulnerable,
Mhm.
safety oriented masculinity,
Mm.
more towards your toxic masculine cultures, which trickle down and harm men just as much, right? And the clear one of that is like protect and provide, right? This is like a very, very clear patriarchal, um, historical, factually incorrect um, um, story about what it means to be a man and
Yeah.
masculinity. This idea that how much you have, how much you make, how much you can provide, how much you can protect for the people around you is what gives you value, right? The problem with that is that that's the very thing that can make you feel invaluable,
Yeah.
right? Or completely valueless, right? So all of a sudden, all of the men's hopes, dreams, ideas, and self identity, and um, everything that's going to permeate out to the people around them, right, is based on these super arbitrary, super unnecessary ideas around what it means to be a man, and it's
Mhm.
not helpful. I'm if you're in the top echelon, the 1%, where you're making those millions and you're doing all of those things, maybe you can delude yourself into thinking that that's a lifestyle that's helpful to
Mhm.
you. Great, you're not the other 99% of men who are struggling in the middle class and the lower class to afford rent and food and those. And if those guys are getting trapped in that same idea, how are they supposed to think about themselves? They can't afford the car. If they can't have 25 naked chicks on a boat, right? If they can't have, if they're being, rejected, time and time again on Tinder, and also rejected, right? That's what it feels like to them, you know what do you expect is going to happen for those guys? Do we expect them to be able to just go, oh, brush it off the shoulder, happy days, it's all good, it's
Mhm.
just a part of life? No, they're going to start to have a lower sense of self-esteem because everything's based on what others think and what others say is right and not what they want, right? Not what they need, not how they want to be. And so, back to my original point, I think there's a part here where guys are learning to slow down and reflect
Mhm.
and come home to themselves um, and then work out individually what it is that makes them happy and content rather than what the narrative of the day might be.
Yeah, and hearing you talk about that, my heart goes out to all the beautiful men in my life. I'm very
I
fortunate to have
know.
some who are very caring, kind, and compassionate. And I think they try their hardest to go against the stereotypes that are out there because that's what's most authentic to them. And that's how they can best serve this world as well. And I do have some men in my life who probably have tried to fit themselves into that narrative, and they've seen the consequences of it. A lot of them are
Right?
older, and their relationship with their families are purely financial transactions. They don't have those loving support networks, and
Yes.
they probably think that's the value that they can add is a big fat paycheck, when in reality, that's just the narrative that they grew up with and they think is correct. And it could have,
Mm,
I think we're really privileged in our generation. So I'm saying we're 30s, that sort of
yep,
generation, we have the ability to really change this narrative for our children as well. And so thank you for
exactly.
sharing that. And I'm interested to hear from you if a man specifically is listening to this show going, thank you for inspiring me. And I'm really interested to take some positive steps towards creating a better relationship with my mental health. What's some really
Mm.
actionable steps they can take in the next 24 to 48 hours?
So, it's obviously going to depend on the individual and what they have capacity to do. If you're privileged enough to have some disposable income, then I'm a little bit biased here, but nothing is going to be as helpful to the reflective process. Nothing is going to be as helpful to skyrocket you forward into the best place you could possibly be without some kind of mentor who has done that work before you. So whether that's a counselor or a therapist or a coach or even any of the any you get lots of people out there kind of trying to do this work now, supporting men. There's lots of groups, there's lots of organizations. But a lot of guys don't have that kind of, if you've got all of the pressure of a family and without a disposable income, there's a number of really great free groups here in Australia. There's the Mankind Project, the Resilience Project. I would also have a look into uh, Gotcha for Life as well. There's a wonderful group here in Australia. Books. So if you're interested in parts work and internal family systems, there's a wonderful book out at the moment called No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz. So I'd highly recommend looking into that, and it goes much deeper into, the compassionate, curiosity-based self-energy that I was talking about earlier. Um, yeah, I suppose really it's just every individual starting to think about what is it that I need right now, because what do I have the capacity to do? But obviously, I think counseling and therapy is going to be the best way for guys to find themselves again, the quickest at least.
Yeah, and this is pretty much the same conversation I have with the majority of guests on here is if possible, speak to someone who's got the results that you're after or who can help show you the way. It's
Yep.
literally the quickest and most efficient
Yeah.
way to get somewhere. And there is, to your point, some really great
Yeah.
free resources out there too if you're not in that position. And I'll be sure to grab the links off you and pop them in the show notes. But I 100% agree.
Absolutely.
Just there's more and more people out there like you. I mean, you're obviously an incredible counselor, and we'll make sure to put your details because I truly think it's some really powerful work that you're doing. And I hope this platform gives more people the opportunity to be exposed to it and take on this journey for themselves. And so if
Mhm.
someone's looking to learn more about Matt Musgrave, where can they find you?
Oh gosh. So if you're interested in learning more about counseling with me or my team, you can go to strongspacecounseling.com. Um, and you'll be able to click any of the buttons there to book in a free 15-minute discovery call where we'll, grab some details and find a counsellor across Australia, either in person or online. Um, who might be best suited to you. But I'm also personally on Instagram and TikTok at Matthew Musgrave _. Um, and I sort of share a lot more about my own sort of personal journey and my own personal reflections and things that I'm doing day to day and the parts work that I'm doing day to day, especially with fathers. So and fathering. So if anyone's interested in that, you can catch me there and send me a DM.
Perfect. And I'll pop all those links below too. But thank you so much for your time today, Matt. It was an absolute pleasure. And thank you for being so
Oh,
honest and
Miff, that
open in
was
your sharing.
awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today for another episode of the Actually You Can podcast. I so enjoy having you here, and I hope you've taken away powerful insights and tools that will support you to achieve your high level results. Now, before you go apply all of this wisdom in your life, I would be so grateful if you are able to leave us a podcast review on the platform that you're listening to, or share this episode with a friend. Your support means that we can help more self-led, high-performing individuals just like you expand what's possible for them. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on today's episode, so please go on and shoot me a note on socials and let me know what you think. You can find me on Instagram at Miff Galloway. Now, go ahead and make those dreams a reality, because actually, you can.